Today in a New York federal courtroom, Diddy Combs told the judge he was, quote, a little nervous. The rap mogul's criminal trial began this morning. Racketeering and more. The two sides are now in the process of selecting a jury of 12 plus alternates. Most of the prospective jurors acknowledge they're aware of Combs's case and also the allegations that span some 20 years. Among those allegations, he's accused of forcing at least 3 women to engage in sex acts with him and at times with male prostitutes during parties known as freak-offs, which last for days. Combs faces spending the rest of his life in prison. CNN's Kara Scannell has been covering all of these developments for us. She's outside New York's federal court right now. So some of these prospective jurors already turned away. Kara, why?
Yeah, a number of jurors have been turned away. One woman, because she had seen that hotel surveillance video, she saw a still image of it where Combs is on camera kicking and dragging his then girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. Now, the jurors said that she referred to it as damning evidence. And after a back and forth with the judge, he decided to excuse her for cause because she had formed an opinion on it. I mean, other jurors had been excused, one because the man had just started a new job and couldn't take off 8 weeks. Another juror was excused because he said he had a negative experience with law enforcement. But so far, 11 jurors have qualified to continue through this process. And the magic number here is 45. Once they hit 45 jurors, that is when the judge will have both the prosecutors and Combs's team do their peremptory strikes. That's where they can eliminate jurors for just about any reason until they get to 12 jurors and a number of alternates. But those who have gotten through, some of them have seen the tape. One woman said she did see that hotel surveillance video. Others were familiar with the case. I mean, there were 2 women who said that they had been sexually abused, saying it happened decades ago, and they thought that they could look at the evidence in this case, which is about sexual assault, and view it fair and unbiased based on what comes into the courtroom. And one woman who is proceeding said she was arrested when she was 16 for shoplifting at Harry Potter's World at Universal Studios. The judge asked her what she stole. She said it was a wand. And then another juror who works for the Department of Corrections said that he pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor felony, and he is continuing in this case. So we're expected to continue as long as it takes to get to that 45 and to get through the strikes. The judge is hopeful that that could be concluded as soon as Wednesday, with opening statements in the case beginning next week and then the beginning of the evidence. So Combs has pleaded not guilty. He has said, his lawyers have said, that all of these allegations are the prosecutors trying to criminalize his sexual activity that they say was entirely consensual. Guys?
All right, Kara, appreciate it. Thank you. Brianna?
All right, let's talk about this now with entertainment attorney and former litigator Lisa Bonner. First, Lisa, I just want to get your reaction to some of what we learned so far. The judge granting a defense request to dismiss a prospective juror because she called the hotel surveillance video damning. Maybe not surprising, but what do you think about this?
Good afternoon, Brianna. It's absolutely not surprising because they want to get to a fair and impartial jury, and someone who has already formed an opinion, for example, is not going to be someone that the defense is going to want to move forward with, because you are supposed to listen to what the judge says in the 4 corners of the room. And so when you are walking in there with an already pre-approved idea of what you think is going to happen and what you think your opinion is going to be, it is hard to be able to say that that person is going to be swayed and can be fair and impartial.
And we do have the jury questionnaire. One of the questions is, have you, a family member, or someone close to you been the victim of sexual assault, sexual harassment, or domestic violence? It's notable 2 women who said they'd been sexually assaulted in the past remain in the jury pool after being questioned. How could that impact things, and specifically how the defense may handle this?
Well, that's one of the things that you would be looking for as a prosecutor, right? You would like someone who has experience with sexual violence. And that does not mean that you have a predisposed notion of what he did, but you are comfortable with graphic testimony, for example. You are comfortable watching videos and you have some experience. So it's not an ideal juror for the defense, but that is someone that the prosecution would want on their team, and that is not a reason to excuse the juror for cause.
What kind of juror does the defense want?
The defense ideally would be looking for a man, an older man, for example, someone who has maybe been falsely accused by the police, someone who may be in a high-powered job with traditional values, someone who really does not come in with a preconceived notion, someone who is skeptical of law enforcement. Those would be the type of jurors that the defense would be looking for.
And at this point, Combs's lawyer is saying he could take the stand. Would you find that difficult to believe? Do you think he could help his case or hurt his case?
Well, that's one of the things that a defense lawyer always says. If you look across any of these prior cases, oh, my client is really considering taking the stand. He really wants to tell his side of the story. And I'm willing to bet that he is not going to take the stand. That would be the absolute worst thing that he can do, because that offers up cross-examination. It offers up his priors. It offers up him to be caught in a lie, and really can talk to him about anything that he has ever done. So there is probably no way that Sean Diddy Combs will take the stand, although that is the very old trick in the book with the defense lawyer saying that he wants to tell his side of the story. I don't see that happening.
Yeah, it would be extraordinary if it did. How tough is this case going to be for the defense?
A big mistake. I'm sorry?
How tough is this case going to be for the defense?
It is an extreme uphill battle for the defense. If you look at the indictment, it is very tight. They have video evidence. They have 4 witnesses, one being Cassie Ventura, who was very detailed and explicit in her complaint. And you have a large digital footprint. You have Combs trying to contact people to try and get them to recant their stories or make sure that their testimony aligns with his. They've got so much incriminating evidence, but the burden is on the prosecution. So the defense does not have to put on a case, but the prosecution has a very, very solid case here, and it's going to be a very uphill battle, especially with what they are offering as a defense, that it was consensual, that these people are in a swinging lifestyle, and the prosecutions are prudes, and that does not really have anything to do with the case. If you have a consensual, sexual swinging lifestyle, the one thing that is implicit in there is consent. And this case is built on the fact that he was abusive, he was violent, he blackmailed people into staying silent. So that really undermines the defense's testimony right there. So I don't really see that this case is going to be easy for the defense to disprove in any way through cross-examination or otherwise any kind of allegations that most of the allegations that the prosecution is putting forward. It's a very, very strong case.
Yeah, we'll have to see what the defense is when it gets into the details of it. Lisa Bonner, thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Trial. Jury selection kicking off today. As many as 150 potential jurors taking the stand to be questioned by the judge and the prosecutors and the defense team. And the questions they were asking today on, whether these people had heard about the allegations against Sean Combs, whether they'd seen that video that appeared to show him assaulting his ex-girlfriend Cassie, and even whether they'd personally been exposed to domestic violence in their life. Now, Diddy is facing 5 federal charges. Those include sex trafficking and racketeering conspiracy. He's pleaded not guilty to all of them and rejected a plea deal that was presented last week. So let's bring in our News Nation legal contributor, Jesse Weber, on this. He's also an anchor at the Law and Crime Network. Jesse, as always, good to see you. So you were not invited to the Met Gala again this year, so you were able to join us.
Well, now I know why you're not there. I couldn't figure it out why Conor McShane wasn't there, and now I see it. It's this antipathy that you have towards it. Now I get it.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's stupid. But everyone in the control room loves it, so they're like, "Oh, we're doing the Met Gala. Fine, we're doing the Met Gala." So the Diddy stuff today. Let's talk about this a little bit. There's a couple of different ways to talk. Like for example, earlier, I'll put this back up. Mark Magnifilo is one of his attorneys. Will they accept some of these premises being the jurors by the defense. So Agdifalo said that Diddy has a quote-unquote swinger lifestyle. And from the court hearing notes, they said there's a lifestyle called swingers that he was in that he thought was appropriate. The reason he thought it was appropriate is because it's so common. You see the charges there. Is it, I mean, like, so you're a jury, you're coming in and they're telling you that, and is it going to be tough to pick people who think that that's kind of common?
I thought it was going to be impossible for this to go to trial within a year of his arrest and indictment, but here we are. Now, they're very confident they can get a jury, a fair and impartial jury, out of 150 prospective jurors within a week. Now, based on the questioning today, just because somebody had seen that video that was circulated of Sean Combs purportedly beating Cassandra Ventura, just because they know some of the celebrities in this case, just because they've seen an HBO documentary about it, doesn't mean they're automatically excluded from the jury. And remember what's happening here.
Right.
So the first few days of jury selection is just about whether these jurors are going to be excused for cause. There's a legitimate reason. After that, both the defense and the prosecution, they have very specific challenges where they can strike jurors for whatever reason they want. And so that's how you whittle it down. And the hope is that by the defense is they will believe that they can get jurors who will move towards the consent defense, right? That all of these people who are going to testify against Sean Combs, they consented to everything that was a part of this case. And by all accounts, consent can be a legitimate defense to the racketeering and sex trafficking charges, although it may be a little bit of an uphill battle.
Okay, so what types of questions were they asking? Well, I think we have some examples, like, do you have knowledge of sexual assault or domestic violence, psychiatry, psychology, security, addiction, or law enforcement? Do you have beliefs, or do you have concerns about the hiring of sexual workers, infidelity, firearms, illegal drugs, and so on? So and I thought it was interesting. You say here, do you have beliefs or views that would not allow you to be impartial about law enforcement, about hip-hop artists, about sexual assault, about sex trafficking? And one final one, have you been through a traumatic event yourself that would allow you to hear about witnesses who've been through traumatic events? So, it's interesting. A lot of people say, well, some people had examples, and some people were taken out of the pool. And then to your point about HBO, that was a good example today, because there's someone who worked there, and they did make a documentary, but that person, as far as I know, was not kicked out of the pool. I guess they didn't work directly on the dock, so it's interesting.
Correct. Yeah. And they might be later down the road by the defense or the prosecution. But there was a potential juror today who apparently was going to produce one of the memoirs from Albie Shore, who has been ancillary connected to Diddy in a way as well. And you're seeing people who have these connections to either anybody who's a part of this case. But I have to tell you, Connell, the level of honesty that we've seen from these prospective jurors talking about their own experiences with sexual assault or family members that were sexually assaulted. You had a juror today who actually admitted they stole a wand from the Harry Potter store in Universal Studios. So the idea of them being honest about their lives is not easy. And sometimes there needed to be safeguards put in place by the judge because these are very private, sensitive issues, but it's important to get a full understanding of who these jurors are, 12 jurors, 6 alternates, because they're going to have a monumental task ahead of them. It's not only difficult, an 8-week trial, but this is a complicated case. Not easy sitting on this jury.
Racketeering.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our News Nation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.
Jury selection is now underway in the DIDDY
trial. Jury selection kicking off today, as many as 150 potential jurors taking the stand to be questioned by the judge and the prosecutors and the defense team. And the questions they were asking today on, whether these people had heard about the allegations against Sean Combs, whether they'd seen that video that appeared to show him assaulting his ex-girlfriend Cassie, and even whether they'd personally been exposed to domestic violence in their life. Now, Diddy is facing 5 federal charges. Those include sex trafficking and racketeering conspiracy. He's pleaded not guilty to all of them and rejected a plea deal that was presented last week. So let's bring in our News Nation legal contributor, Jesse Weber, on this. He's also an anchor at the Law and Crime Network. Jesse, as always, good to see you. So you were not invited to the Met Gala again this year, so you were able to join us.
Well, now I know why you're not there. I couldn't figure it out why
right.
Conor McShane wasn't there, and now I see it. It's this antipathy that you have towards it. Now I get it.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's stupid. But everyone in the control room loves it. So they're like, oh, we're doing the Met Gala. Fine, we're doing the Met Gala. So the Diddy stuff today, let's talk about this a little bit. There's a couple of different ways to talk. Like, for example, earlier, I'll put this back up. Mark McNiffolo is one of his attorneys. Will they accept some of these premises being the jurors by the defense? So McNiffolo said that Diddy has a quote-unquote swinger lifestyle. And from the court hearing notes, they said there's a lifestyle called swingers that he was in that he thought was appropriate. The reason he thought it was appropriate is because it's so common. You see the charges there. Is it? I mean, like, so you're a jury, you're coming in and they're telling you that, and is it going to be tough to pick people who think that that's kind of common?
I thought it was going to be impossible for this to go to trial within a year of his arrest and indictment, but here we are. Now, they're very confident they can get a jury, a fair and impartial jury, out of 150 prospective jurors within a week. Now, based on the questioning today, just because somebody had seen that video that was circulated of Sean Combs purportedly beating Cassandra Ventura, just because they know some of the celebrities in this case, just because they've seen an HBO documentary about it, doesn't mean they're automatically excluded from the jury. And remember what's happening here.
Right.
So the first few days of jury selection is just about whether these jurors are going to be excused for cause. There's a legitimate reason. After that, both the defense and the prosecution, they have very specific challenges where they can strike jurors for whatever reason they want. And so that's how you whittle it down. And the hope is that by the defense is they will believe that they can get jurors who will move towards the consent defense, right? That all of these people who are going to testify against Sean Combs, they consented to everything that was a part of this case. And by all accounts, consent can be a legitimate defense to the racketeering and sex trafficking charges, although it may be a little bit of an uphill battle.
Okay, so what types of questions were they asking? Well, I think we have some examples, like, do you have knowledge of sexual assault or domestic violence, psychiatry, psychology, security, addiction, or law enforcement? Do you have beliefs, or do you have concerns about the hiring of sexual workers, infidelity, firearms, illegal drugs, and so on? So and I thought it was interesting. You say here, do you have beliefs or views that would not allow you to be impartial about law enforcement, about hip-hop artists, about sexual assault, about sex trafficking? And one final one, have you been through a traumatic event yourself that would allow you to hear about witnesses who've been through traumatic events? So, it's interesting. A lot of people say, well, some people had examples, and some people were taken out of the pool. And then to your point about HBO, that was a good example today, because there's someone who worked there, and they did make a documentary, but that person, as far as I know, was not kicked out of the pool. I guess they didn't work directly on the dock, so it's interesting.
Correct. Yeah. And they might be later down the road by the defense or the prosecution. But there was a potential juror today who apparently was going to produce one of the memoirs from Albie Shore, who has been ancillary connected to Diddy in a way as well. And you're seeing people who have these connections to either anybody who's a part of this case. But I have to tell you, Connell, the level of honesty that we've seen from these prospective jurors talking about their own experiences with sexual assault or family members that were sexually assaulted. You had a juror today who actually admitted they stole a wand from the Harry Potter store in Universal Studios. So the idea of them being honest about their lives is not easy. And sometimes there needed to be safeguards put in place by the judge because these are very private, sensitive issues, but it's important to get a full understanding of who these jurors are, 12 jurors, 6 alternates, because they're going to have a monumental task ahead of them. It's not only difficult, an 8-week trial, but this is a complicated case. Not easy sitting on this jury.
Racketeering.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our News Nation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.
Federal prosecutors and music mogul Sean Diddy Combs' defense team will question potential jurors on their views on distribution of illegal drugs, the music industry, and people engaging in sexual.
Well, video to our monitors take us to the Big Apple, where the federal racketeering and sex trafficking case against Sean Diddy Combs is underway. So here's what's happening right now. Jury selection started earlier this morning. The hip-hop artist faces 5 counts, including racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking. Combs pleaded not guilty, but faces decades in prison. So let's bring in CBS News correspondent Jerika Duncan. Jerika, first of all, good to see you, even though you're having to be under an umbrella there, my friend.
Great to see you, Reed.
We understand that you have an update on what happened in court. Tell me about that.
That's right. It appears that at least 2 of those jurors have been seated. I just left court about 15 minutes ago, and they are still questioning jurors. Remember, they need 12 that they will seat and 6 alternates for this federal case against Sean Diddy Combs. And just to give you a sense of some of the questions that the jurors were asked before they were questioned by the judge and also prosecutors as well as the defense team, if they had any issues with sexual assault, if they had any experience with it, their views from the prosecution on law enforcement. They were asked if they received any training or had any experience with psychiatry, psychology, addiction, law enforcement. They also asked about any questions or reservations they had about artists and the hip-hop community, witnesses that will testify under immunity. So this is just a few of the questions that sort of give us a look into what each side is looking for when it comes to that impartiality of a juror. And many times over, the judge mentioned that Sean Diddy Combs is presumed innocent unless he is found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. He mentioned that over and over again to each juror that was questioned. Last check, though, about 9 jurors had been questioned, 2 that we know that were seated, in which the prosecution and the defense agreed they were comfortable with seating those jurors. So a lot to learn throughout the next couple of days, which is how long the judge said this should last. They're hoping to get through about 50 jurors each day. But both sides recognize how difficult this case will be in terms of getting that right jury pool to make sure that folks don't come in here with preconceived ideas because of that video that went viral that we saw of what appears to be Sean Combs kicking and dragging his former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. But this really comes down to a federal case, the U.S. government, United States government against Sean Combs, facing sex trafficking and racketeering charges, which could get him up to life in prison if he's convicted on all charges.
Well, Jerika, if I'm in that courtroom, I have a huge question in my mind, whether I'm with a prosecution or defense, and that is, how can I seat a jury in a case against one of the most famous men on the planet, and especially now infamous, made more infamous by that video you talked about? It's a challenge.
It really is, Reed, and I think that's why even with the questionnaires that these jurors filled out, it was an opportunity for both sides to ask questions to those jurors based on how they filled out that questionnaire. There were some other telling moments in what we are now learning about some of the people and places, for instance, that jurors were asked about if they were familiar with. For instance, one juror said that they were familiar with, I believe it wasn't, stand by because it is wet outside and I want to make sure I get it right. It was number 88, and that was apparently Michael B. Jordan. And then there was number 117, Mike Myers. So these were jurors saying that they were familiar with pictures of these people, but just knowing them as actors or celebrities. Then there were parts where the judge said, what about number 133? You had a question about that person. And this was juror number 4. They said, I know them as a celebrity, but in that case, the judge didn't mention them by name. And just as I was leaving, another juror was asked about Kanye West in terms of what that juror knew about Kanye West or their feelings or thoughts about him. So we don't know how that will play into this trial, whether this is a situation where maybe one of the witnesses or alleged victims says they saw people at a party, or whether these were just people that were at a Diddy party that we've talked about along with this case. So it's too early to presume exactly what that means, but there are a number of locations and people that these jurors were already shown to find out their connection to or just how familiar they are with some of these people and places.
All right, Jerika Duncan, CBS News. Always great to talk to you, my friend. Let's hope the rain lets up for the Met Gala that's happening in New York as well. We don't want to see anybody under an umbrella for that iconic event. Thank you so much, my friend. Take care.
Very much. Now to the high-profile sex trafficking trial of disgraced music mogul Sean Combs, which got underway today with jury selection.
Yeah, prosecutors allege that Combs and his associates used his power and influence to coerce women into engaging in sex acts dating as far back as 2008.
Today, potential jurors were given a list of celebrities and public figures whose names could be brought up in the trial. That includes Kanye West, Michael B. Jordan, Mike Myers, and Kid Cudi, though it's unclear exactly how those names on the list relate to the trial.
Eyewitness News reporter Darla Miles in court today has the latest from Lower Manhattan. Darla.
David and Liz, the judge spent most of the day quizzing these prospective jurors about how much they know about the case and what they've heard about this case in recent days, and as you mentioned, what they know about the celebrities that might be mentioned in this trial. Sean Combs looking as studious as a college student in a white collared shirt under a navy blue sweater with navy slacks. The 55-year-old granted permission to shed his beige prison clothing throughout the 8-week trial for sex trafficking and racketeering. In a 26-floor courtroom, the tedious process of selecting a jury for a global entertainment icon, starting off with a pool of 60 people who were told as a group the hardship has to be extraordinary for you to be excused. Combs standing up as that group is escorted out, then brought back in one by one to answer follow-up questions about this 17-page questionnaire they filled out prior to arriving today. One main question: before today, have you read, seen, or heard anything about Mr. Combs or the criminal charges brought against him? A former parochial school teacher telling the court, I guess when they went into his house, they found a bunch of baby oil, saying she liked a social media post about the case. Several prospective jurors telling the court they have seen the 2016 video of Combs assaulting his ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, one woman calling it a potentially damning piece of evidence.
And these allegations have been all over the news, all over the press in one way, shape, or form. So in order to find someone who can sit on this jury, you have to find someone who could put aside that information and be unbiased.
The defense strategy coming into focus before jury selection started. A forensic video analyst will share his expertise and provide technical analysis, but is not allowed to address the real-world impact of seeing Combs on video.
That is obviously the problem that you have in any high-profile case, and particularly this where you've got the video of his former girlfriend.
And a medical expert for the defense will be permitted to testify about the drugs prescribed to Combs and, in general, the effects of drugs on certain people. But he cannot specifically address the effects of drugs on Combs, whether or not he actually took those prescribed drugs, nor offer any opinions. Now, once there are 45 qualified prospective jurors, then they'll go back in for a second set of questioning. Attorneys will be able to ask them specific questions and strike the ones they do not want to serve. Reporting live in Lower Manhattan, Darla Miles, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Thank you, Darla. For the next several weeks, you can count on Eyewitness News for continuing coverage of the trial of Sean Combs.
Today, potential jurors were questioned and given a list of celebrities connected to Combs.
Okay, Fox 5's Lisa Evers was inside the courtroom all day, and Lisa, today was all about finding the 12 men and women who will decide his fate.
Yes, and a very interesting day and a very busy day here at federal court, Stephen, Natasha. A lot is on the line for Sean Diddy Combs in this federal sex trafficking and racketeering case. If he's found not guilty, he walks out of the MDC a free man. If he is found guilty, he's looking at the possibility of spending the rest of his life behind bars. Now, several dozen prospective jurors were questioned today by Judge Arun Subramanian as the jury selection process got underway in full force. Now, everyone being considered this week was part of an original group of 700 potential jurors who filled out questionnaires and they weeded through that number last week. Many were disqualified. So today, Sean Diddy Combs was in court wearing his court-authorized new trial uniform, which was a white shirt, a black sweater, black pants, sitting there, and glasses, paying very close attention to every single word that these potential jurors were saying, as well as what the judge was saying. Now, his lawyers, they did question some of them. By the end of today's session, more than a half a dozen were disqualified for various reasons. Now, Judge Arun Subramanian, one of the things he mentioned several times during the day, both the morning session and this afternoon session, was that jurors, obviously, many had already heard of this case, but the key point was whether or not they could base a decision and base a verdict on what is presented as evidence in the courtroom. Now, there were a number of jurors who were disqualified today because of being sex assault survivors or having somebody close to them who was a sex assault survivor. Also, law enforcement people, anybody related to law enforcement, people who had encounters with the criminal justice system, and there were also people for various jobs and duties that they did that they took issue with. But they were very careful about it. It's really, as one jury consultant told me, a deselection process at this point, where they are eliminating people who are not qualified to serve. Now, one of the other reasons, there were several jurors who were disqualified because of their lack of proficiency in English. Some of them could not even fully understand the instructions that the judge was giving to them. There were other people who were there, and because of things that had happened to them, domestic violence incidents to people that they loved, were disqualified. And also another question that kept coming up, because there was an additional questionnaire for these semifinalists, if you want to call them that, in the jury pool, was basically, would they be disturbed talking about sexual acts with other jurors as they were deliberating on a verdict, and would they be upset or traumatized by talk of descriptions and evidence and testimony about sexual assault. So it's extremely thorough. Seeing that process firsthand there inside the courtroom was really an eye-opener for me, and I know it was for a lot of the other people in there too, because they're very concerned about how the jurors will react to the type of evidence that is going to be presented. And also the other key concern was obviously the tremendous amount of pretrial publicity that has happened, that has been out there in this case, an unprecedented number of documentaries, and also, you know, that people, could they really make their decision based on the evidence in court, not what they've seen in a documentary, not what they've seen in the media. But that's what's happening today. This will continue with day 2 tomorrow. Guys, back to you in the studio.
Huge responsibility, no doubt about that.
Diddy's nervous. That's what he told the judge on day 1 of his federal sex trafficking trial in Manhattan. We're only on day 1 of what's expected to be a long trial, and around 90 minutes in to the jury selection process, Diddy asked for a bathroom break. The judge. Kanye West, Kid Cudi, Michael B. Jordan. These names and other celebrities came up at day 1 of Diddy's sex trafficking trial in Manhattan. Those names were on a list of possible people whose names might come up at some point during what's expected to be an action-packed 2-month trial. At the beginning of a trial like this, the jurors are given a chance to say if they have any sort of association.
There we go. We are getting all caught up on our celebrity news this morning with TMZ producer Michael Babcock, live from L.A. Ooh, I'm in L.A. where the sun's always shining.
It's not. It's not. It's all right. It's hard to tell. It looks like it's going to be a decent day. How you doing, Mario?
I'm doing all right. It's just the rain has me in a bed. It's been raining for like.
Is it raining? Hold on, I can't hear. I got to make. Oh, sorry, I couldn't hear you. So it was raining? I'm sorry. I hope it clears up. Something's happened. I don't know what. It's not raining here. It sounds like it is, though. So forgive me if you hear that noise.
We hear nothing. You look nice.
Okay.
Got your
Thank you.
chain out, I see. Where are you coming from?
Oh, you know, sleeping.
No,
I can't. We're on a different thing here today, so I can't see you. This is very unfortunate.
You're missing out because the earrings really set
I
this
can only
dress
imagine.
off. That's all I'm going to say. And I did a nice little something different with my eye makeup, but it's fine.
We got to figure out the return because we're not on Skype anymore. So, guilt. I mean, that just seems like a Herculean task. It seems nearly impossible to do, but that's what they're going to have to try and do here. So they will ask a lot of questions. It's probably going to take the better part of a week to find a jury. And I think at the end of the day, it's not about finding people who don't have an opinion on the case necessarily, but can you change your mind? Are you amenable to that? And I think that's going to be the big question.
And it's supposed to last at least 2 months. I mean, can you imagine being...
Happening today, jury selection begins in Sean Diddy Combs' federal trial in New York City. The disgraced music mogul is facing 5 criminal counts, including sex trafficking and racketeering conspiracy. He's been behind bars since his arrest in September. Jury questioning is underway right now. It's taking place at a...
Jury selection is underway in the sex trafficking trial against hip-hop mogul Sean Diddy Combs. This comes nearly 8 months after his arrest. Both sides are hoping to find 12 jurors who can be fair despite the publicity this case has received. Diddy has pleaded not guilty, but if convicted, he could face life in prison. National correspondent Alex Miller is live outside the Manhattan courthouse. Alex, it seems like it's been slow going. How is it coming along at this hour?
Well, jury selection, the first day has now wrapped up, but essentially it was a slow day. The first half of the day, the judge seemed very pleased with how quickly it moved. But right after lunch, we spent about an hour and a half excusing a handful of jurors. In that time, just 1 or 2 were able to get through to the next round. Remember, this is just the first part of jury selection. They need to get a couple dozen potential jurors through after they've answered this initial questionnaire, answered questions from the judge. If the judge deems them legitimate enough to move to the next round, then they go and they'll be asked even more questions from both the prosecution and from the defense. And so they need to get that few dozen before they can move on to that process. That is not even close to happen just yet. And they want to wrap this up by Wednesday, though they do have the entire week should they need it. But the jurors were asked a lot of personal questions. Obviously, this case involves sex trafficking, and the description in that 14-page indictment talks about beating up both men and women, talking about rape, talking about extortion, things along those lines. And so there is a lot to be answered for in terms of people's personal experiences. And so potential jurors were asked about their own experiences with sexual assault, sexual harassment, and domestic violence. And at least half a dozen of them had their own personal experiences, whether it was 4 women who talked about their own sexual assault when they were younger, or whether it was one man who his sister was a victim of domestic violence, a woman whose mother was a survivor of domestic violence. All of these things could be relevant, and not all of them thought that they could put aside those memories to be a fair and impartial juror. They were also asked whether or not they felt comfortable talking about these issues with other jurors, something that they're of course going to have to do in the deliberation room. They were asked about whether they felt comfortable watching videos. We are likely going to be shown a lot of footage over the course of this 8-week trial or so. So that is really the crux of this issue. The other really big takeaway here is that now infamous hotel video that shows Combs punching and beating up and kicking Cassie Ventura. That video may be entered into evidence. Cassie Ventura called to the stand. So they were asked, some potential jurors asked if they had seen the video. Nearly every juror who was asked about it had seen that video, or at least still images from it, something obviously the defense does not want. They tried to get those jurors thrown out. Not all of them were in the hearings that we had leading up to this trial. The defense has been fighting hard to not allow that into evidence. It's unclear whether we're going to see the video in its entirety. The prosecution dropping a little bit of a bomb today, saying that they're not going to show the CNN video, which is originally how this video came about. But we may see the video in its entirety at some point today. Obviously, Diddy has a lot of star power here. So before jurors even walked in the room, they were handed a big binder of relevant people and places that they were asked to identify. Now, it doesn't mean that these people engaged in these escapades, these alleged escapades with Sean Combs, but they are at least somewhat relevant to the story. It doesn't also mean that these people are going to be called as witnesses, but there were a number of big names that were talked about in this courtroom just in terms of whether or not these people recognize them. And so there's still a lot more to answer for, a lot of people left to question that will happen over the next at least day and a half.
All right, Alex Miller in New York for us. Alex, thank you for that update.
Today was day one of jury selection in the sex trafficking trial of Sean Diddy Combs.
Joining me now is NBC's Rahema Ellis, who is outside the courthouse for us, and former Brooklyn and Queens prosecutor and defense attorney Deanna Paul. Okay, Rahema, take us inside court. What's been happening there?
Well, one of the things I want to say, Chris, is that in defense of Sean Diddy Combs, his lawyers are saying that these accusers are ex-girlfriends and all of the sex was consensual, was a part of consensual relationships. We've just found out that the jurors have taken a lunch break that's going to be for about an hour. There's been questioning going on for about 3.5 hours, with the exception of one short break. And several names have come up during the course of this, celebrity names such as Kanye West, Michael B. Jordan, and the actor Mike Myers. None of them have been accused of anything, and we don't know exactly why these names are coming up, that they're asking the prospective jurors if they have any knowledge of these people. Many of them said yes. That's not surprising. They are, after all, celebrities. We want to show you also some sketches we have of Diddy Combs. You'll see him. He is in the courtroom. He is not wearing that prison outfit that he was assigned when he was arrested back in September, but instead he's in a white collared shirt, a black crew neck sweater, gray slacks, and he is clean shaven with the exception of a little gray goatee, and his hair is gray. He was going gray before he went into prison, but in prison they're not allowed to use hair dye, so his hair is more natural at this point. So lots of questions have been going on. Several jurors have been excused for one reason or another. Many others who did say they knew about Diddy, they know about the charges that he's been accused of, but they said they had not formed an opinion. And one person said that he is presumed innocent until proven otherwise. That's where we are at this point. Chris?
Thank you so much, Rahema. Appreciate that. Deanna, let's start with the basics, because whenever you have somebody who's as famous as Diddy is, household name, does that complicate jury selection?
Absolutely. This is one of those rare cases where it's safe to assume that any prospective juror knows who Sean Combs is and has probably seen the video of him seemingly assaulting his ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. So the goal of jury selection is to weed out anyone that can't put aside any sort of preconceived notions. They're going to be asked about domestic violence, about group sex, about drug use, about hip-hop. And if there's a juror that says that they can't be fair, they'll likely be excused.
I want to ask about that tape, because it was only recently that the judge ruled that hotel surveillance video, I think it was recorded back in 2016. It shows him beating, kicking, dragging Cassie Ventura. It's difficult to watch. If you're a part of the defense team, how tough is that?
That's going to be an uphill battle for the defense. It's one of those things that you see, and the video speaks for itself. How do you really counter that, especially where he had denied everything until the video came out? But there's also been some good evidentiary rulings for the defense. The judge just the other day said that of the four accusers who the government had wanted to come in and testify as prior bad acts witnesses, he's only allowing one of them. And that type of evidence can be really powerful for a jury when they hear it, to lead them to conclude that somebody has a propensity to commit sex crimes.
And you know one of the attorneys on the defense team. He has a long history of representing these kinds of cases. He represented young thugs in the Georgia case. I think that was the longest ever criminal trial in that state's history. He's so well known that Drake named a song after him. What do we know about Brian Steele?
So we know that he just came off of the Young Thug case, which was, as you said, the longest prosecution in Georgia. It was a RICO case, and he was successful in that case. And RICO is a really powerful tool for prosecutors, where they can string together disparate events into one cohesive narrative. And so having someone with recent successful experience in that realm is going to be important here.
Yeah, and again, as you say, a RICO trial is something that can be a very powerful tool, and it kind of gave him a lot of notoriety, a very different kind of case, though, right? So I'm trying to figure out if there's a tie, besides the fact that he's successful, that you would hire him.
So we both read a New Yorker article about him, which talks about...
We did, fascinating.
Which talks about his likability, and having him in the courtroom, it's someone that New York jurors may not be as familiar with. And I mean, he comes to it with obviously a wealth of criminal defense experience. And so when it comes to cross-examining witnesses, all
trial. Jury selection kicking off today. As many as 150 potential jurors taking the stand to be questioned by the judge and the prosecutors and the defense team. And the questions they were asking today on, you know, whether these people had heard about the allegations against Sean Combs, whether they'd seen that video that appeared to show him assaulting his ex-girlfriend Cassie, and even whether they'd personally been exposed to domestic violence in their life. Now, Diddy is facing 5 federal charges. Those include sex trafficking and racketeering conspiracy. He's pleaded not guilty to all of them and rejected a plea deal that was presented last week. So let's bring in our News Nation legal contributor, Jesse Weber, on this. He's also an anchor at the Law and Crime Network. Jesse, as always, good to see you. So you were not invited to the Met Gala again this year, so you were able to join us.
Well, now I know why you're not there. I couldn't figure it out why Conor McShane wasn't there, and now I see it. It's this antipathy that you have towards it. Now I get it.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's stupid. But everyone in the control room loves it. So they're like, oh, we're doing the Met Gala. Fine, we're doing the Met Gala. So the Diddy stuff today, let's talk about this a little bit. There's a couple of different ways to talk. Like, for example, earlier, I'll put this back up. Mark Agnifilo is one of his attorneys. You know, will they accept some of these premises being the jurors by the defense? So Agnifilo said that Diddy has a quote-unquote swinger lifestyle. And from the court hearing notes, they said there's a lifestyle called swingers that he was in that he thought was appropriate. The reason he thought it was appropriate is because it's so common to see the charges there. Is it? I mean, like, so you're a jury, you're coming in and they're telling you that, and is it going to be tough to pick people who think that that's kind of common?
I thought it was going to be impossible for this to go to trial within a year of his arrest and indictment, but here we are. Now, they're very confident they can get a jury, a fair and impartial jury, out of 150 prospective jurors within a week. Now, based on the questioning today, just because somebody had seen that video that was circulated of Sean Combs purportedly beating Cassandra Ventura, just because they know some of the celebrities in this case, just because they've seen an HBO documentary about it, doesn't mean they're automatically excluded from the jury. And remember what's happening here. Right. So the first few days of jury selection is just about whether these jurors are going to be excused for cause. There's a legitimate reason. After that, both the defense and the prosecution, they have very specific challenges where they can strike jurors for whatever reason they want. And so that's how you whittle it down. And the hope is that by the defense is they will believe that they can get jurors who will move towards the consent defense, right? That all of these people who are going to testify against Sean Combs, they consented to everything that was a part of this case. And by all accounts, consent can be a legitimate defense to the racketeering and sex trafficking charges, although it may be a little bit of an uphill battle.
Okay, so what types of questions were they asking? Well, I think we have some examples, like, do you have knowledge of sexual assault or domestic violence, psychiatry, psychology, security, addiction, or law enforcement? Do you have beliefs, or do you have concerns about the hiring of sexual workers, infidelity, firearms, illegal drugs, and so on? So and I thought it was interesting. You say here, do you have beliefs or views that would not allow you to be impartial about law enforcement, about hip-hop artists, about sexual assault, about sex trafficking? And one final one, have you been through a traumatic event yourself that would allow you to hear about witnesses who've been through traumatic events? So, you know, it's interesting. A lot of people say, well, some people have had examples, and some people were taken out of the pool. And then to your point about HBO, that was a good example today, because there's someone who worked there, and they did make a documentary, but that person, as far as I know, was not kicked out of the pool. I guess they didn't work directly on the dock, so it's interesting.
Correct. Yeah. And they might be later down the road by the defense or the prosecution. But there was a potential juror today who apparently was going to produce one of the memoirs from Albie Shore, who has been ancillary connected to Diddy in a way as well. And you're seeing people who have these connections to either anybody who's a part of this case. But I have to tell you, Connell, the level of honesty that we've seen from these prospective jurors talking about their own experiences with sexual assault or family members that were sexually assaulted. You had a juror today who actually admitted they stole a wand from the Harry Potter store in Universal Studios. So the idea of them being honest about their lives is not easy. And sometimes there needed to be safeguards put in place by the judge because these are very private, sensitive issues, but it's important to get a full understanding of who these jurors are, 12 jurors, 6 alternates, because they're going to have a monumental task ahead of them. It's not only difficult, an 8-week trial, but this is a complicated case. Not easy sitting on this jury.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our News Nation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.
That's kind of common.
I thought it was going to be impossible for this to go to trial within a year of his arrest.
Activity in the Diddy case now. It is kind of forming because the both sides are now taking stands on issues that are going to be critical to this case. And what is particularly interesting is what just happened with respect to drug use, which is going to be front and center in this case.
We know that in the indictment, prosecutors have said they believe that Diddy drugged his alleged victims to make them more compliant during his big parties, during freak-offs. So now the issue is about Diddy's drug use, and there is a battle over, as prosecutors describe it in these documents, his mental capacity and the testimony of a psychiatrist.
Now, this is going to get a little bit confusing, but I think we can unravel this. So here's what the prosecutor said.
Right. The prosecutor is saying, we do not want this psychiatrist to testify to anything having to do with how drug or alcohol use affected Diddy's state of mind during these alleged crimes.
More specifically, whether it excused some of the conduct, whether Diddy, the prosecutors are saying that the defense wants to use this shrink to show somehow, this is what the prosecutors are saying, that even if Diddy committed a crime, he didn't have the intent to do so because he was so whacked out on drugs. That seems to be what the prosecutors are saying. But, I don't think that's right. I don't think that's, and this is my opinion on this, but I think I'm right on this. The defense is not saying that, well, it's a crime, but he didn't really mean it. The defense is saying what happened is not a crime at all. It's a lifestyle. It is a choice that Diddy and the alleged victims made, and that when they engaged in drug use, they did it freely, but there are things that happen when you use drugs.
Use these particular drugs.
And particularly like an MDMA or something like that.
But I know that's what you're theorizing could be what the defense is going to say. The reality is, in the documents, we don't know, right? Because...
Yeah, I think one way or the other, no matter how you slice it, what we're talking about is, right, the issue of intent, right? You can't have a crime, at least this crime, without the intent to commit the crimes for which Diddy's been accused. They're saying it may be, Harvey, I think you're onto something here, that it may just be caught up in this entire lifestyle. There's no intent to commit a crime here. What there's an intent is to have sometimes drug using, people are consenting to drug use, and then it leads to a lot of sex, but that's all part of this party freak-off atmosphere, this swinging atmosphere, but it doesn't mean there was ever an intent to commit a crime, and it doesn't mean any crime was committed just because all the people were sort of wrapped up in this partying lifestyle.
I want to go just a tiny bit further than that. It's not even so much intent as what they did is what people do when they take drugs. We know the defense is going to say everybody, they're going to argue everybody voluntarily took these drugs, and that when you do, there are inhibitions that just go away. And it is part and parcel of doing this, even though the jury may not be familiar with it, this is what happens when people do drugs. I think that's the point of the defense calling the shrink.
The reality is we don't know. In the documents, there's a lot of it that is redacted that has to do with what this condition, the alleged condition is. So we can't tell for sure, but certainly prosecutors think that it's going to be something about his capacity to make decisions. Because there's a part of it, I just want to read this part that says, they did not offer proper notice, the defense, about evidence of the effects of drugs and alcohol on a defendant's memory or cognitive function.
Now, that could be...
So that's what prosecutors clearly think that the doctor is going to testify
But
to.
that may not be Diddy. That may be the alleged victims. See, that's the point, is that may go to not what Diddy's memory was, it's what the alleged victims' memories were. And again, I am sure the defense is not going to concede, oh, he committed a crime, but. They're not going to say that. So I think the shrink is going to testify, you know, when the alleged victims testify, their memories may be faulty because here's what happens with drugs. Again, I'm not embracing this. I'm just saying...
The problem with that is that Diddy also did those drugs.
Right.
Right?
So they're saying it's all the lifestyle, which is what we heard on Friday. Now, a huge blow to the defense is that on Friday, the prosecutors won, and the Cassie video is going to be admitted in this trial, and that is going to be critical.
Yeah, we know it's going to be critical. I mean, one, we've all seen the video. We know everyone has opinions about it, and we saw this in practice when we did our last Diddy documentary, and we talked about his...
On the sex trafficking, they convicted, and they were on 3 counts, and they were hung up on 2 of them. But on the sex trafficking, they convicted him unanimously. And I debriefed them and asked them what moved them.
How many people did this profoundly impact in making your decision, that Cassie video? Show of hands. Cassie video. So it really impacted you folks. Did it turn it for you?
Yeah.
Why?
Being a woman myself and seeing a woman like that just made me more sensitive to the whole case itself, and probably maybe more siding with the victims, seeing a victim instead of him being the person that was attacking her. So I can't side with him because I don't see anything done to him in that light that was done to her.
I didn't know much about the case at all, so I came in completely objective, and watching him beat his girlfriend, he's like prohibiting her from leaving as well. It's very distressing to watch.
It had a huge impact. And again,
you know what's interesting?
He's not being tried for that, but it is impactful.
What I thought was interesting is that the jurors who raised their hand, it was a cross-section. It wasn't just white people, it wasn't just black people, it wasn't just men, it wasn't just women.
Everybody, yeah.
That's...
Absolutely, that's so important.
Very telling.
And by the way, will be extremely important when it comes to jury selection. And a lot of people think this case begins and ends with the composition of this jury.
Now, that video, I think, certainly plays a role in at least one of the questions, not several, that Diddy's defense plans to ask the potential jurors when jury selection begins a week from today.
This just came out.
Right. These are they filed 30 questions that they plan to ask during the voir dire process. Here are a few critical ones because clearly sex is going to be a big deal here. They said, there may be evidence in this case about people engaging in sexual relations with multiple sexual partners. Would hearing about that type of evidence be difficult for you? There was also a follow-up question about people cheating, where they say, look, there's going to be evidence about people cheating on boyfriends or girlfriends. I think that is interesting because Diddy's explanation, I won't say defense, explanation for what happened in that Cassie beating video is that they were arguing, that was the tail end of an argument about him cheating with someone else.
That's right.
She had seen his phone.
His phone. Now, I'm surprised at that first question. What I'm surprised about are the words, would it be difficult for you? I'm surprised at that because I thought they were going to make it more about whether jurors would be judgmental about it.
Right.
Not that it's difficult, but do you look down on people who have this kind of lifestyle? Because I think that's what you want to hear. And I'm assuming they're going to ask that in follow-up questions.
Right.
But it's not about, is it hard to hear? It's, do you judge people poorly if they engage in that type of lifestyle? That, to me, is what the defense wants to hear.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's what they're trying to get to there. But obviously, there's a way they word these things and then
they can follow up, right.
Just a couple of the other questions that are in there. There are a total of 30. One, this is interesting. Do you believe that wealthy people get away with things that the less wealthy do not?
That's the celebrity justice
That's the
question.
celebrity, exactly. Are you going to judge him because he's a celebrity? How are you going to feel about that? And then another one about drug use. Do you have any personal experiences or opinions about drug or alcohol use or addiction?
See, the hard one there is, are jurors going to be honest about that? Yeah, I've done cocaine and heroin or MDMA.
Well, you could also say, I have a friend and I saw what they went through, right? So, you know what I mean? Like, there's a way around. The juror doesn't have to go,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I did lots of coke.
But you know what I'm saying. It's like, how far are these jurors going to go?
They're not going to go on trial. They're not suddenly going to find themselves on trial if they say, well, yeah, I did try MDMA.
Some of them are going to feel that way when they're asked that question. I just think that's a really it's an important one, but I think it's really interesting.
What's up, everyone? I'm AMG Benzo down here in Atlanta, and I have three things to hit on. The Cassie video is...
The defense is...
drugs, the music industry, and people engaging in sexual relations with multiple partners, among other topics, according to court filings. The jury selection process marks the first step in the federal trial against Combs, who is facing a number of federal charges, including sex trafficking and transportation to engage in prostitution. He has pleaded not guilty to all the charges. In an unsealed federal indictment, prosecutors allege Combs and his associates used power to coerce women into sex acts and encounters known as freak-offs, dating as far back as 2008.
He used the embarrassing and sensitive recordings he made of the freak-offs as collateral against the victims.
Jurors are expected to hear from some of those victims, including Combs' ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura, who was seen in this disturbing hotel surveillance footage being kicked and dragged by Combs back in 2016. A judge ruled this video will be shown to the jury despite numerous attempts by the defense to have it excluded.
My behavior on that video is inexcusable. I take full responsibility for my actions in that video.
Court filings from the prosecution allude to federal searches of Combs' homes in Los Angeles and Miami last year, where law enforcement seized various freak-off supplies, including narcotics and more than 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lubricant. In New York, I'm Lee Waldman. The potential jurors in this case will be asked a series of questions, both from Sean Diddy Combs' defense and federal prosecutors. Some of those questions could center around drugs, sex with multiple partners, and the hip-hop industry itself. Experts believe seating a jury in this case that will be impartial and willing to listen to the facts only could be a challenge. Federal prosecutors and music mogul Sean Diddy Combs' defense team will question potential jurors on their views on distribution of illegal drugs, the music industry, and people engaging in sexual relations with multiple partners, among other topics, according to court filings. The jury selection process marks the first step in the federal trial against Combs, who is facing a number of federal charges, including sex trafficking and transportation to engage in prostitution. He has pleaded not guilty to all the charges. In an unsealed federal indictment, prosecutors allege Combs and his associates used power to coerce women into sex acts and encounters known as freak-offs, dating as far back as 2008.
He used the embarrassing and sensitive recordings he made of the freak-offs as collateral against the victims.
Jurors are expected to hear from some of those victims, including Combs' ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura, who was seen in this disturbing hotel surveillance footage being kicked and dragged by Combs back in 2016.
Jury selection now underway in the Sean Diddy Combs sex trafficking trial in Lower Manhattan.
Now, this phase of the case comes 7 months after the music mogul was indicted on charges of sexually abusing and exploiting his victims, as well as racketeering and sex trafficking charges. And among the people testifying against him is his former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. Let's bring in jury consultant who has worked on some very high-profile cases to hear what we can expect in this case. Dr. Joellen Demetrius, thanks so much for joining us. Let's start with the defense. How do you find an unbiased jury in a case where the public has already heard and seen some very disturbing things about Sean Combs?
Well, that is obviously the problem that you have in any high-profile case, and particularly this where you've got the video of his former girlfriend. From the defense perspective, what you're going to be looking for are those people who don't have any issues with having multiple sexual partners. You're going to be looking for people who probably enjoy listening to rap music. People who may be skeptical of media reports, and I suspect probably people who are younger and possibly those that are male would be better jurors for the defense in this case.
And so what about the prosecution? What are they looking for? And also, what would automatically say, nope, I don't want to see those folks on the jury?
Well, I'll start with that question first. So those people who have said that they've seen the video, that they are very critical of it, that they've formed an impression about his guilt, as well as those people who have talked to others, whether it be family members, friends, or work colleagues about this case. Anybody like that is going to be possibly problematic for either side. But from the prosecution's perspective, generally what they're going to be looking for are those people who are law and order oriented, which generally means older, people who have they themselves or a family member or somebody close to them either been a victim of domestic abuse or sexual abuse. And those people who probably enjoy more like classical music and stay as far away as possible as they can from rap music. And again, I suspect because so many females are allegedly involved, those people who are female on the jury may be more prosecution oriented.
You know, it's a complicated case in many ways. We're talking about, 4 victims, the charges that Rachel says, mentioned racketeering to sex abuse. So what kind of juror, in a case like this, it's so complicated and it can go in different directions. Do you look at someone from the defense or from prosecution in terms of making it less complicated or finding a way to if your defense, making it so that people can't keep track of it all?
Right. And, so analytical skills are going to be important as well. But one of the other things that certainly I would be looking at is those people who perhaps followed Bill Cosby's case or Harvey Weinstein's case. The Me Too movement clearly is going to be a very important component. You want to know if people still believe in the Me Too movement, or do they think it's gone a little bit too far? So all of these, you're right. I mean, it's a very complicated issue, and it's complicated in jury selection as well. And finally, I think one of the things that either side should do would be looking at the social media accounts of each one of their prospective jurors, because while people may say one thing in court, they can say something very different in their social media profile.
Yeah, and I'm assuming even you mentioning that jury selection has changed over the last few years with the advent of social media. Thank you so much, Dr. Demetrius, for sitting down with us this afternoon. It is going to be an interesting few weeks. Even the jury selection likely not going to be that simple and easy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And for the next several weeks, you can count on Eyewitness News for continuing coverage of the trial of Sean Diddy Combs, both on air and online at ABC7NY.
Federal prosecutors and music mogul Sean Diddy Combs' defense team will question potential jurors on their views on distribution of illegal drugs, the music industry, and people engaging in sexual relations with multiple partners, among other topics, according to court filings. The jury selection process marks the first.
Now to the Sean Combs trial. For more than 2 decades, Combs was one of hip-hop's biggest names.
But U.S. prosecutors say that behind the scenes, Combs was coercing and abusing women with the help from a network of associates who allowed all of it to happen. Combs has pleaded.
Jury selection begins in Sean Diddy Combs' highly anticipated federal sex crimes trial. He has spent the last 8 months in a Brooklyn jail after being indicted last September. Combs has pleaded not guilty to charges of racketeering, conspiracy, sex trafficking, and transporting people across state lines to engage in prostitution. He could face the rest of his life in prison if convicted on all charges.
Joining us now to talk more about this trial is TMZ executive producer Michael Babcock. Always good to see you, Mike.
Hey, guys, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Goes without saying, Combs is a big deal. Music, fashion, liquor, you name it. Goes without saying, how could his high profile, though, make it tough to find an impartial juror?
Yeah, I think, Terrence, that's the point, right? Is that you've got this guy who is so incredibly famous in a case that has been covered nearly every day since this investigation started about a year ago, when we saw those bi-coastal raids, the feds at Diddy's homes. And, you know, it's been near nonstop since then. So the reality is, how do you then find a jury of Diddy's peers here that doesn't already have an opinion on his innocence or guilt? And that's the big question here. And that's why there are so many questions being asked of these potential jurors in the courtroom today. And this is not something that's going to be figured out today. In fact, they've wrapped for the day. This is not something, obviously, that's going to be completed today. You're likely going to be looking at the jury selection for the better part of this week before we ever even talk about making opening statements next week. And then you're looking at probably 8 to 9 weeks of a trial. But again, first, they've got to find a jury. And if you do know about the case, then it's about finding somebody who is amenable to having their mind change, is not set in he's innocent or he's guilty, can have their mind changed.
You know, you were talking about what a big star he is, and he also had a lot of friends with some who are very well known, ties to Hollywood, big time celebrities. Just in jury selection today, jurors were given a list of people related to him. A lot of those names familiar. Do you expect some other well-known names are going to come up during this trial?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, there has not been a whole lot of celebrity support for Diddy. I think the way a lot of celebrities have looked at this is, hey, these are allegations that I don't want to be anywhere near, and I'm not going to comment, despite the fact that they may have a friendly relationship with Diddy, may have hung out with him over the years. So that certainly there's that celebrity aspect of it. But I think, too, the lawyers and the judge asking these questions because they want to know, is somebody intoxicated by fame? You know, is there a no world where you might convict Diddy because you are just so blown away by his fame? And I think the other side of that coin, too, do you feel like because he is this famous celebrity that he is guilty? So I think they're trying to get a feel for, you know, what's your perspective as a potential juror? Do you love celebrities? Do you hate celebrities? And I think that's why you're having a lot of those questions asked amongst a bunch of other topics that were also asked about today.
Yeah, a lot of people speculating Cassie might be a key witness for the prosecution as well.
And they're going to show that video too.
Yeah, you mentioned there's no telling how long this could take, but any inkling how long this trial might go on?
I think it's going to be at least 2 months, probably more like 9, maybe even 10 weeks in the middle of the summer. That's another consideration. Obviously, you've got jurors who have children, and with school being out in the summer, is there childcare issues? So that's also going to be an aspect of this. I think the one good thing, the positive thing that came out today for the potential jurors is that they will not sequester them. The OJ jury was sequestered. This jury will get to go home every day. The judge just said, you cannot talk about this with anybody, not your husband, not your wife. You got to be quiet at home.
Okay, so Combs is, of course, maintaining his innocence and has even reportedly refused a plea deal. The evidence against him doesn't look so good, pretty damaging, in fact. Could a plea deal or something happen now that the jury, you know, is being selected? Any chance that there might be a surprise coming?
I suppose there's always a chance. I would be absolutely shocked. Diddy was in the courtroom on Friday, last time they all got together before they were going to start jury selection today. And the judge said, you know, Sean, did the prosecution offer you a plea agreement? He said, yes. The judge even said, you understand this could mean ultimately you serve far more prison time than they offered you. And Diddy said, yes, you're absolutely right, Sylvia. He has said, I am innocent of these charges, and he plans to prove it. We will see. You're absolutely right, though. He is literally facing the rest of his life behind bars, potentially.
Jury selection is underway in the sex trafficking trial of rapper and record producer Sean Diddy Combs. Combs faces several federal charges, including racketeering, conspiracy, sex trafficking, and moving people across state lines for prostitution. Prosecutors allege Combs ran a criminal enterprise where he, through the help of his associates, forced women into sex acts with male prostitutes and drug-fueled parties. His attorneys argue the acts were consensual. Combs has pleaded not guilty to all charges. He faces up to life in prison if convicted. Jury selection started today in rapper Sean Diddy Combs' federal sex trafficking trial. Legal experts say the process could take several days to complete. Fox's CB Cotton has more from New York.
Sean Diddy Combs back in a New York courtroom on Monday.
We're going to turn out to the news of the day, and we're going to begin with the high-profile sex trafficking trial of Sean Combs. Jury selection got underway today. Combs is accused of using his power and influence in the music and entertainment industry to coerce women into sex at drug-fueled parties for years. He claims the sex was consensual. Eyewitness News reporter Josh Einiger is live at the courthouse in Lower Manhattan with the very latest on how day one went. Josh.
Well, day one is now over, Liz, and they so far have selected 19 people to make it to the next round of jury selection. The goal is to get a group of 45 prospective jurors. Both sides will then whittle that down to 12 who will be seated, 12 New Yorkers who will decide the fate of this world-famous rapper. His hair now gray, the bespectacled man in the sweater sitting at the defense table bore little of the bearing of the global hip-hop mogul. Instead, in a federal courtroom today, Sean Combs watched the tedious process of selecting a jury who will decide his fate.
The question isn't really whether or not you know him or like his music, obviously. It's whether or not you think you can be fair.
Over a decades-long career that saw him adopt stage names from Puff Daddy to Diddy, prosecutors say Combs turned his business into a criminal enterprise in support of his depraved sexual habits, including drug-fueled parties, coercing women into sex, and then covering it up.
Combs allegedly planned and controlled the sex performances, which he called freak-offs.
Jurors also are likely to see this video showing Combs chasing down and kicking his then-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, who's alleged years of abuse. When the video went viral, Combs himself apologized publicly.
I mean, I hit rock bottom, but I make no excuses. My behavior on that video is inexcusable.
Prosecutors say Diddy roped his entourage into an enterprise of sex trafficking, drugs, and weapons. Some of his employees expected to testify in the case, being brought under federal racketeering laws.
And that's specifically so that they can bring in an enormous amount of evidence, starting from 2008, victim testimony, cooperator testimony, evidence of guns that were seized from his home, all of the things that he allegedly used to intimidate and force people into prostitution. The question is really whether it proves that he committed these crimes or, as he will contend, that he was just partying and having fun.
The goal here is to select the jury by the middle of the week for opening statements, then to begin on Monday in a trial that could take more than 2 months. If convicted on this 5-count racketeering indictment, Combs could go away for a life, and he was clearly feeling the pressure today. "I'm sorry, Judge," he said in court. "I'm a little nervous." We're live at federal court in Lower Manhattan. Josh Einiger, Channel 7. Eyewitness News.
That one sentence says so much. All right, Josh, thank you very much. And we invite you to stay with Eyewitness News and ABC News throughout the trial.
Now to hip-hop mogul Sean Diddy Combs' federal sex trafficking trial. Jury selection began today in New York City and could last several days. Joining us to discuss is attorney and legal analyst Jana Spilborn. It's great to see you again, Jana. So first of all, how likely is it that teams will be able to find an unbiased jury that's never heard of Diddy?
Yeah, it's going to be tough. Although I'll tell you, the last person you want on the jury is someone who's never heard of him, right? Because if they haven't heard of P. Diddy, what rock have they been living under? But what you do want is to find people who don't have a preconceived bias against these very salacious issues. Look, there's sex trafficking. There are sex crimes alleged here. You could easily have people in the jury, potential jury pool, who have very strong opinions.
All right, now let's talk about what is tipping the scales of justice. Jury selection kicks off today in the trial for Sean Diddy Combs in federal court in New York, where he's accused of sex trafficking. Now, no cameras allowed because it's federal court, unfortunately.